The People's Platform.
Moni Mohsin is an author and journalist born and raised in Pakistan, living between London and Lahore. She began her journalistic career at the Friday Times, Pakistan's first weekly newspaper, where she started a long-running satirical column, The Diary of a Social Butterfly. Now working as a freelancer, she writes on culture, politics, lifestyle, class and society. Her journalism has appeared in The Guardian, The Times of India, 1843, Vogue, The Nation and Prospect. Moni Mohsin has written 5 works of fiction, 3 novels, The End of Innocence, The Impeccable Integrity of Ruby R, and Tender Hooks, aka Duty Free, and 2 books of collected butterfly columns, The Diary of a Social Butterfly and The Return of the Butterfly. She also hosts a comic podcast called Browned Off with editor and critic Faiza Khan, in which they lift the lid on diversity, or the lack thereof, in contemporary Western culture. Good evening and welcome. My next guest is British-Pakistani writer Moni Mohsin, famously the columnist of The Diary of a Social Butterfly. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
You're a journalist turned fiction writer. How has this transition been like? When you're a journalist, you're used to reporting the facts as they are. How has the transition been in terms of crafting fictional narratives?
So I was always a feature writer when I was a journalist. So I was writing about culture and the arts and society. And I used to tell stories about people. They were always people-driven. So that helped me, because I met a lot of people. I learned how to write, how to describe my encounters, etc. Also, while I was a journalist, I started writing The Diary of a Social Butterfly as a newspaper column. So it began as a weekly column in a weekly newspaper. And it was about, it was fictional, the characters in it were fictional, right. But they talked about real events in real time. So when I transitioned to fiction, all of that helped me. It kind of, I'd already done the groundwork almost.
In The Diary of a Social Butterfly, its protagonist is a strong, outspoken woman. How is this not a reflection of Pakistani society, but how is this a call to Pakistani women to be strong, to be outspoken?
So I grew up in a home with a very empowered mother who empowered my sister and myself as well. She in turn had been empowered by her grandmother, who was one of just 3 sisters. So my great-grandfather had no sons, and he brought up his daughters like men, to make their own decisions, to take positions on topics that they felt strongly about. So for me, it just didn't make sense to have a character who was not outspoken, etc. And in Pakistan, I will say that although women don't have much authority, many women don't have authority, but they do have power. Butterfly also, her husband is the head of the house, he makes all the big decisions, etc. But she speaks her mind, she's cognizant of his ridiculousness as well. And she is not afraid to point it out.
The Pakistani women that I know are very empowered and very powerful, so yes, this does resonate. What is the role of humor in addressing serious topics? You speak of gender dynamics, societal norms, cultural norms.
My brief when I began writing the column from my editor was that he wanted me to deal with serious subjects but with a light hand. So I had to think of a way of doing it without lecturing and hectoring and preaching, because that's so dull and nobody would read it. So I came up with this solution of integrating humor into it, or using a humorous voice to raise these issues. And when you have humor, people are more receptive and they are more forgiving. And you can slide in the critiques and all the sort of the darts, etc., while pretending to be just joking, and people read it, and then the whole idea of satire is that first you laugh and then you think. So that helps me.
As a British Pakistani writer, how do you manage to reflect on the intricacies of Pakistani culture, honoring the nuances? This is for the benefit of readers from within Pakistan and also the Pakistani diaspora across the world.
Well, I'm Pakistani diaspora now. I was born in Pakistan. I grew up in Pakistan. I was educated in Pakistan. And then I went for higher education to the UK. Then I returned to Pakistan. And I lived there for 10 years and I worked in this newspaper that I mentioned. It was called the Friday Times. And I got married and while I was at Friday Times, I started the Diary of a Social Butterfly. Right. So it was already established. I'd already made the characters. I'd already discovered the voice. I'd already found the format. And I'd been doing it for several years before I got married. And then when I got married and moved to London, I just continued in the same vein. And because I go to Pakistan all the time, and I have family visiting all the time, etc. And so it hasn't been difficult to continue in the same vein. And because I guess it is authentic, the voice is authentic, the issues are current, it resonates with readers, diaspora and Pakistani readers at home.
When doing my research for this interview, I read that you host a comic podcast called Round Off about realities surrounding diversity in contemporary Western culture. Speak to us about it.
So during COVID, we weren't able to go out very much in London. We weren't allowed to meet people. So I have a very dear friend who's an editor, and she and I think the same on many topics. And I said to her, she was an editor at Bloomsbury, her name is Faiza Khan. And I said to her, Faiza, wouldn't it be fun to do a podcast? And she said, well, there are so many podcasts. What can we bring to it? I said, we can bring our Desi voices to it. And so we decided to do this podcast, which is about diversity, or the lack thereof, in Western culture. So, for example, they will tell you things like, you write to an agent, and you say that I'm a Pakistani woman, and I want to write something. And they'll say, well, actually, your work is nice, but I've already got a brown client, a female brown client. Or somebody will say to you, an editor will say to you, yeah, your books are fun because they're humorous, etc. But our readers don't like humor from the subcontinent. They want dark, deep stories from the subcontinent. This was more true before BLM, Black Lives Matter. But now people are afraid of saying those things openly, but but there is still that sort of belief and feeling, because recently I approached somebody to pitch Butterfly, for a television series, and she said, yeah, this is fine, it's great, but we need to have white characters in it, otherwise nobody will watch it. Wow. So that's why we started our podcast. Because
but that has been proven not to be true, because we've seen Mindy Kaling's Netflix series, Never Have I Ever, with all brown characters.
Yes.
And it was phenomenal.
Yes, but I think the English public is still behind that, and in that view. Sure. Recently they made Suitable Boy. Do you remember seeing that on BBC? It was all in English. They could have used much more Urdu and Hindi, etc., to make it more sort of, although it had brown characters. Yeah. It was.
So it's sort of tweaked.
Yes.
To be more palatable to the
white
audiences.
Yes.
Okay.
There was this feeling for a long time that white audiences cannot identify with anybody or anything which is not within their own everyday experience. That is, but...
Yeah, but are we simplifying the issue, do you think?
I think the tide is turning, and I think as more and more content is being made. So, for example, now the white audiences are very happy watching British audiences are very happy watching French serials as well. So there's one called Lupin, there was one called Call My Agent. They were entirely in French, but they watched them and they liked them. They liked and watch a lot of, like Made in Heaven as well. But these are still niche programs. They're basically for the diaspora brown people. But again, the diaspora is huge.
Yeah.
And we felt that there was a market, and that these voices need to be honored and treated with the same kind of seriousness that other voices are.
Across much of Pakistan, increasingly, we see the rise of authoritarian leaders, the rise of misinformation, disinformation, not just in Pakistan, but also across South Asia, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh. What is the role of the arts, the novel, to ensure that people don't follow blindly?
Well, we can't ensure, we can only try. But as a writer, I think the most important thing, and particularly as a fiction writer, is to stand witness, record everything you're seeing truthfully, because it's important to tell it like it is. That's one thing, to be honest, to be authentic, and to be as fair as you can be. And second, I think, is to ridicule it. You know, because it's only when people are... The first thing that a dictator does when he comes to power is to go after the poets, to go after the novelists, to go after the cartoonists, to go after the stand-up comics, and they go after cartoonists and stand-up comics because they make fun of them. And when you make fun of a populist leader, you show people exactly how ridiculous he is or she is. And that makes... that somehow or the other manages to erode their power. And that is something they can't bear, which is why no jokes are allowed, no humor is allowed, no satire is allowed, and poets are exiled, writers are imprisoned, because they fear us. Yeah. And so it is important that we understand our power and use it. Use it wisely.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you very much, Moni Mohsin. This was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The People's Platform.
TV1, Sri Lanka's premier infotainment channel. In support of Sri Lanka's unique tradition of art and design, presents The Genius of the Place, the story of Jeffrey Bava, a film by Abdel Aziz. Exclusively aired in Sri Lanka on TV1. 11th of February at 5:30 p.m.
මොකද මහත්තයෝ මේ රිස් කරලා සැරයිද
මං කිව්වහම පුළුවන් තරම් හයියෙන් මෙතනින් දුවලා එළියට යන්න.
ඒ පින්චෝ ඒ රාමා ඔන්න කෙල්ල ටික පනිනවා අල්ලගනින්න.
අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්
බින්දුවටම ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරපු සමහර දේශපාලන ප්‍රවාහයන් ආයෙනවා. කලාව නාව. ඒකෙත් කලාවක් තියෙනවා. ඒක කලාව. ඒ මොකද්ද? කොහොමද ඒක කියවන්නේ?
තරුණයෝ ඉල්ලුවේ සිස්ටම් චේන්ජ් එක. ඒක උනේ නෑනේ.
ඒක හදන්න මිනිස්සු ඉන්නව නැත්තේ නෑ. IMF එකෙන් ණය ගත්ත හැකි. ඔව්. ආර්ථික කඩාවැටීම. මේ සංස්කෘතික කඩාවැටීම සිදු වුණාන් පස්සේ අපි කාගෙන්ද ණයට ගන්න කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙනවා.
හරි කරගෙන කාට හරි ගෙයිමක් දීලා කීයක් හරි හොයාගෙන ඉන්න නම් පුරුෂාර්ථය හැදිලා තියෙන ජීවිතේ එතනින් එහාට යගේ හියුමන් ලයිෆ් එකේ ගමනක් නෑනේ.
මිනිස්සු ප්ලෑන් කරපු ජීවිත නැති වෙලානේ හැමෝටම තමන්ගේ ජීවිතය අහිමි.
ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ දරිද්‍රතාවයක් කියනවා. Poverty of democracy.
බුද්ධිමය සංවාදය බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා රාත්‍රී 10:30ට මාවත.
TV1. TV for life. President urges everyone to unite in the pursuit of the nation-building dream. SJB stages walkout during President's policy statement in Parliament. Chandrika Bandaranayake to lead Podujana Eksat Peramuna. Multiple factions claim Election Commission has the right to call for elections and not the President. TV
1. TV for life.
The People's Platform.
Balli Kaur Jaswal is the author of Inheritance, which won the Sydney Morning Herald's Best Young Australian Novelist Award in 2014 and was adapted into a film at the Singapore International Festival of the Arts in 2017. Her second novel, Sugarbread, was a finalist for the 2015 inaugural Epigram Books Fiction Prize and the 2018 Singapore Literature Prize. Her third novel, Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, was released internationally to critical acclaim in March 2017. Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows was also picked by Reese Witherspoon's book club and the Galle book club in 2018. Jaswal's novels have been translated into 15 languages. Jaswal has travelled widely to appear in international writers' festivals, to conduct workshops and lectures on creative writing, pursuing an artistic career, the power of storytelling, global citizenship, and social justice advocacy through literature. She has also completed her PhD in South Asian diaspora writing.
My next guest is Singaporean author of award-winning and critically acclaimed novels, including Inheritance, Sugarbread, and Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows. I'm so pleased to welcome Balli Kaur Jaswal. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to Sri Lanka. Welcome to Galle.
Thank you.
Balli, through your writing, you delve into the complexities of cultural identity. And identity and belonging are such nuanced concepts to do justice to, not because they are not just geographical, but also they are deeply rooted in memory, lived experiences, emotion. How do you manage to navigate this?
I think I try to prioritize the character and the story first, and thinking about what the character wants and what the character needs. So, obviously there are tangible things that the character wants to achieve, in that story, and there are ways in which the character needs to grow. And often the way that the character will grow is by, finding that sense of belonging and feeling included in their community somehow. My characters usually start from a point of being excluded and having to sort of find their way back, or thinking that they have to find their way back, but then realizing actually that communities need to expand their definition of what is acceptable and their definition of who gets to be included.
In most of your novels, you advocate for women's agency through your storytelling, and your characters are strong, empowered women. How important is this portrayal for women who are reading this?
I do want, I want readers, not just women, all readers to see what's possible.
Absolutely.
I want readers to kind of follow the growth of a character who starts off not having much of a voice and then gains that voice. So I think it's very important to have those characters. They often don't start from a place of being empowered, and they find empowerment sometimes in surprising ways.
Your third novel, Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, was critically acclaimed. It's also deeply human. Older Punjabi Sikh widows speaking about their sex lives in a context where we are taught to shame ourselves, where sex is so taboo. So how did you overcome these controversies, and how was it received initially?
The novel was very positively received. I would say even by members of the Punjabi diaspora, as far as I know, as far as what was fed back to me, was very positive. Like, I got a lot of positive messages from people in India and also in the diaspora. That was exciting. Of course there's going to be backlash, and of course there are going to be people who are not pleased about women talking about sexuality and taboos. That's what the novel is about, though. The novel is exactly about that discomfort. So it's interesting when there are people who are saying you shouldn't say this. That's exactly what the novel is trying to tackle, and that's actually sort of proving the novel right in a way, that there's this culture that needs to change and need to be more accepting.
You believe in the power of storytelling, global citizenship, and social justice advocacy through your storytelling and literature. How does this work for you?
Storytelling, it's so much of our identity, so much of who we are and what we know about each other and ourselves is based on stories. There's this sort of idea that, and it's very true, I think, that at the end of the day, all we have are stories. All we have are memories. All we have are, the narratives about who we are, the places we came from, and how things have changed. And I think that, in a world that's increasingly, in some ways, very hyper-connected, but also very isolated and very deeply disconnected, I think, one thing that can, move us towards a better understanding of global citizenship and more embracing of global citizenship is to listen to each other's stories, and especially the nuances in those stories.
The protagonists in your novels are women who learn to empower themselves. Do you see a disconnect between your stories and women in real life the world over?
First I did when I first started writing. I think I thought, I want to create an ideal because I'm not seeing this enough in the world. And then since I've written, I've heard stories from a lot of women who have come to tell me, ways in which my novels sort of resonate with them, ways in which they rebelled in small ways or even in quite big ways, that they kind of chose their own path to happiness and left the community expectations behind and sort of created these identities for themselves that are fully kind of authentic and not so much based in shame and taboo. So I think I don't know if I'm necessarily creating, I don't think it's that much of a stretch anymore. I think these stories absolutely exist, and actually I'm discovering them, I'm finding them.
Okay. What's next in terms of taking on taboos?
I'm really interested in taboos around motherhood. I've written mother characters, but mostly from the perspective of daughters, and now that I'm a mother of 2 small children. I think you can't win as a mom. I think you're always being shamed. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. I think that the pressure that is put on mothers is enormous, and I'd like to see. I'd like to kind of take a look at the intersections between being a mother and then being an immigrant, or being a mother and being South Asian and being part of a diaspora, because a lot of those double standards of motherhood are also placed on immigrants.
What's the role that men have to play in this whole paradigm?
Men can speak out against the patriarchy. Men can challenge each other to think, differently of women. They can challenge each other to stop the policing of women and to sort of examine their views and the ways in which perhaps they hold women back. Yeah, so I think there's a lot that men can do. And actually I've gotten a lot of responses from men. In particular, I've gotten a few messages from Punjabi men who have written to me to say that they actually found themselves reflecting on their relationships with their sisters and their female cousins and their mothers a little bit different after reading my novel Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, because they hadn't really thought of them as wanting more than what they were given. Yeah, so I that's a huge win for me. I think that's exactly why I write.
All right, fabulous. Balli Kaur Jaswal, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
ප්‍රශ්නේ අර පූජකෙන පාතාල නායිකාව ඔෆිස් එකට බැස් එක.
වැරදි කරලා ඊට පස්සේ වැරදි හදාගෙන ජීවිතේ පටන් ගත්තා නේද?
හීන විතරක් තිබිලා බෑ අපි. අපේ හැම හීනයක්ම හැබෑ කරගන්නවා.
මිනිස්සෙක්ට හීනයක් ඉටු කරගන්න බැරි වුණොත් ඒක තමන්ගේ වරද කියලා තමයි සමාජයේ මිනිස්සුන්ට ඇඟිල්ල දික් කරන්නේ.
හැබැයි මේ වෙලාවේ පූජක ඉලක්කය අභිමයි.
යන්තම් කුරුළුගේ හිත හැදීගෙන ආව විතරයි. මේ මිනිස්සු ඇවිත් ආයෙමත් ඒ හිත කඩලා බිඳලා දැම්මා.
නීල පබලු අද රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්